robot called Courier with artificial intelligence. But allow me today to perform it because it's an important task for the nation. I'll take only 5 minutes to take you through the framework. And what we're going to look at are the main issues that are going to form the topics for consultation. We all know that our correctional system has the laws that have been mentioned. We have the Kenya Prison Service, and we have probation and aftercare service. We also have Directorate of Children Services that deals with rehabilitation of children in conflict with the law. So the correctional system exists in Kenya. It's been functioning since 1902. And the problem is that most of the laws since 1946 have never been reformed. So the process that we are undergoing is to make sure that the correctional system undergoes reforms that are in line with the Constitution, but are also in line with the international best practices. So we've identified about 27 issues that we want to consult the public on, but they can be summarized into 10 topics. The first one is rights and obligation of offenders. The second one is administration and management of correctional institutions. The third, coordination of correctional services institutions. Fourth, offender management. We are looking at custodial and non-custodial offenders. 5 is aftercare and resettlement of offenders in the community. And then 6 is oversight of management of offenders. And then 7, parole system. 8, prison enterprise. And 9, oversight and accountability of correctional services institutions to the public, to parliament, and the rest. And then number 10 is training and professional development. So the team has looked at all these issues and identified some of the areas that they want to consult the public on. The first one is that the aligning correctional services legislative framework to the Constitution requires that certain principles are respected. One of them is upholding the Bill of Rights. The second one is promoting public safety. The third is professionalism within the services. And the fourth one is diversity and inclusion. Correctional services institutions, and we hope that the consultation paper will guide the discussions. Then we have the other key areas that we're going to consult on is the institutional framework for management of correctional services. The first one is Kenya Prison Service, looking at the Office of the Commissioner General and the Deputy Council as far as the service is concerned. Youthful offenders institutions, how they should be managed and coordinated across correctional services, including coordination with children services, and then responsibilities of prison officers. So those consultations will, the consultation on Kenya Prison Service will follow that particular line. Then we have Kenya Prison Service, Probation Service. We're going to look at the Office of the Secretary Probation Service, the constitution of that office, the function of that office, the role, and then we look at the Probation Council that is going to bring in all the agencies that are involved in probation and aftercare and offender management services that we're going to offenders. Then finally, sir, we look at training and professional development. Here we have three main issues: training policy and curriculum for correctional services. This is the Leadership Academy, and how the academy should help in promoting, providing leadership courses for correctional officers. Again, we hope that the public will be able to help us, including the services, on how that should proceed. Finally, we are looking at oversight and accountability. There are four main issues there. internal complaint mechanism within prison and probation services, inspection of facilities, independent investigation of complaint from offenders and also members of the services, and stakeholder engagement. So again, we want the public to tell us how by the state and internals, and then how stakeholders should be engaged in correctional service. It's been Nakuru and to hear from offenders also, and to hear from their customers. Then there'll be stakeholders consultations. Some of the stakeholders are represented here from 9th to 10th of September. This will be done in Nairobi. We have stakeholders from the criminal justice, key technical departments and experts on Kenya Prison Service and probation and aftercare. Thank you. So the topics again are, as I said earlier, and we hope that these are enough to guide us. Thank you very much, sir.
Allow me, sir, to invite again the Principal Secretary to conduct
us are involved in this, and we all have a stake in ensuring that the process succeeds. So you're welcome. Any volunteers? We want to hear anything, the good, the bad, the ugly, criticism, any feedback that will help this process. And I believe this is the start of the public participation process. Karibuni. Yes.
Good morning. Thank you very much. My name is Selina Iseme. I'm from the Public Service Commission. Just something I've observed. One of the areas that the team will be consulting on is diversity and inclusion. And here, there's no sign language interpreter. I don't know whether we are inclusive in terms of that. So maybe as a comment, as the team goes out, the public is diverse. So ensure that the people that come to give their views are also diverse, because they have a stake in what is going on. So you will have to confirm that the venue is accessible, and whatever presentations are being made are also accessible. I had a time when we were doing public participation, and the venue was on a 12th floor of a building, and it didn't have a lift, and people came in crutches. You can imagine how that happened. So just caution. Thank you.
Thank you. That is well noted.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Moses Maranga, Executive Director, NCAJ. maybe with your permission, PS, allow me to say that the Honorable Chief Justice would have wanted to be here, and she said that she supports the process, stakeholder engagement, and the entire justice sector, which she heads, and NCAJ is committed to the process. Having said that, I know we have just interacted with a few slides. Please allow me to mention that I have seen several regions. The team can explore other stakeholder engagement initiatives. Nowadays tunaona watu wakiongea kwa X-Space. Perhaps, I don't know kama siku moja PS tutakupata huko ukisikiza maoni, but it's something maybe the team can explore, plus many other forums which may not necessarily be regional based, but ICT based. Thank you.
Thank you. That is well noted.
Thank you very much, the chief guest and the PS. My name is Laban Ayiro, the Vice Chancellor DASTA, but also a member of the International Correction Education Services. And I think the presentation on the framework was a little rushed. So maybe you need to create space within your programming for people to interrogate the framework and then be able to send in their contributions. But I'm hoping that as we go through this framework, there are key imperatives internationally that you need to make reference to. One is the human rights compliance. I think this one we must be very strong on it as Kenyans. Two, rehabilitation and reintegration. And that's where the universities are coming in and other partners. I think that is very critical, rehabilitation and reintegration. Three, the policy framework must emphasize improving infrastructure in our prisons. Our prisons are centers of hell on this earth. There's so much overcrowding and healthcare is minimal. Four, legal reforms. Our penal code, criminal code have to be looked at extensively by the team that is working on this. Five, staff training and welfare. I think our prison officers have been subjugated to those conditions of prisoners, and so their training and welfare needs to be included in this framework. And number six, I think as a country, because of the overcrowding in our prisons, we must have alternative sentencing as a thrust in the policy framework. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you're working around those ones, but they must come out clearly. The challenges, a good policy framework should be bold enough to bring out the challenges so that we can bring in objectives and be able to cost them. A framework without budgetary implications is just a piece of paper. So we need to do that by looking at our challenges. But I'll submit a paper on strategic recommendations that can go in this policy framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. We sincerely appreciate that feedback. I believe the committee will take that into consideration, particularly what you have alluded to in the last bit of the challenges and the budgetary implications. We will take that into consideration.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Mombi. I think my main contribution is, so I'm somewhere in the middle between a Gen Z and a millennial. So the phrase public consultation is a bit sensitive at the moment. So my plea is just to make sure that the actual contributions by the people who we are here for, who are the inmates, are actually taken into consideration. I often find myself conflicted when we come in spaces like this, we're in a nice hotel and we're having sausages and nice coffee, but the people who we are actually here for, as the person who's spoken before me has mentioned, are in hell, more or less. I was once arrested and stayed in for an offense that I didn't commit. It was very little, but I would not want to be there again. So I've seen there's a long schedule of public participation hearings, but the people who would tell us most about what will make a difference are the poor and marginalized, who often find themselves in prison, and the ones who are in prison themselves. So as the per diem is being pocketed, please let's not lose focus of the people who we are actually doing this for. And if it helps, let's remember that at the very end.
My name is Mary Airo, the National Coordinator of the Paralegal Society of Kenya. And I want to give my view as a person who has practiced or worked in the prison for many years, in different prisons in the Republic of Kenya. And I want to put emphasis on the issue of infrastructure. And I'm putting that with the focus on the intersex persons, that we now have quite a big number of intersex persons. And looking at the case that we had some times back, where this person made their way into our prison. The first prison that this person made their way was Langata Women's Prison. And from there, after the search, they realized that this is an intersex person. Then the person ended up in committee prison, and where this person suffered a lot of violations. So the prisons, our prisons do not have that. Were built perhaps at times when we did not have the intersex persons. So that must be put into consideration. The other thing I'm looking at is children accompanying their mothers in prison. And I'm saying that because having practiced in the prison, I have seen these children that many times it is the welfare officer who goes out of their way to get partners who can actually provide food for these children, food in terms of food for children, for example, milk, and other things for young children. So as we look into that, I think it is important to actually factor in these children that accompany their mothers in prison. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is noted.
Thank you, Madam PS, Your Excellency. My name is Peter Oko. I stand on two fronts. I work in the criminal justice sector, and I'm also an ex-inmate. And I'd like to raise just two issues here. Number one is on the prison's earning scheme. I hope it's captured when we go into that. Because after many years of someone serving in prison and they come out and they can't start their lives afresh, even though they have the skill set, it's hard to reintegrate. The second bit is the issue of certificate of good conduct. If you've rehabilitated someone, they've come out, they want to start their lives afresh. They can't get jobs because of that certificate of good conduct. They've paid their dues to the society. On the other hand, they can't get jobs. I hope that is also captured. Because I know, even within our system, and His Excellency Musalia knows very well, that one of his key brothers, Honorable Raila Odinga, is an ex-inmate at committee. But he gets jobs and is now getting a job at the AU as you're championing that. So what I'm saying is just about the equity level, where we can also champion for the others also who've been through the same committee and they can get jobs, even the TVETs. Madam, you know you have some of the best trained instructors who've come out of prison after many years and they can't get jobs even in the TVETs to train our people. So those are the things I wanted to raise. Then finally, I hope there's a policy also as we work
on compensation for wrongful convictions. Because there are people who've gone through the system for crimes they didn't commit, they come out of prison, they can't start their lives afresh, there's no compensation policy for wrongful convictions. I know the NCAJ has been doing a great job. Some of the laws that we want to look at, they've actually been, working on them. So I hope some of these things will be captured to have equity in the justice system. Thank you.
Good morning again. My name is Maurice Kaberia. I work with Justice Defenders. We work in prisons. I'm also an ex-convict, having served some years in death sentence. First of all, I want to recognize the efforts, even with the previous act of the Prisons Act, the CAP 90, of the Prisons Service of Rehabilitation. Because while in prison, that's where I studied, I got my law degree, and now I'm almost joining the bar very soon. So I wanted to see whether we can be able to do also a policy on education, because it's a great and impactful rehabilitative tool. We have bodies and organizations which support education in prisons, but the government itself, and our Excellency, the Prime Minister, Prime Cabinet Secretary hears this, is that the government does not put enough money into prisons for education purposes. And this is a sector where most of people who led in prison actually had problems. Most of the times we criminalize poverty because people who are illiterate don't know even their rights, don't know even how to avoid going into crime. They want bread for them, for their children, for their families, and they find themselves in crime. But if they had an opportunity, maybe through education, they could have done better and become better citizens. So to stop crime and to reduce the rate crimes in Kenya, I think we need to look at this point about educating people who are in prison, so that also them, when they come out, they can be able to educate other people on how to avoid crime and become good ambassadors of a free society, crime-free society. I also want to touch on paralegalism. Most of our inmates who are in prison today, and Madam PS, you know this, that most of the inmates are remedies, people who have been remanded, awaiting trial. And most of them cannot even afford the services of advocates. So what are we doing in this policy, this act? Where do we place paralegalism in prisons? I think it should be a section, a clearly defined section on paralegalism, allowing paralegal officers, both prison officers and also inmates, to do the paralegal work like we do. We've done it practically. You can see it happening. We have paralegals who are officers in prison, and they are helping inmates to assess justice. So I think this can be done and can be included in our policy and act, and this will give a more humane society within the community in prisons. Thank you.
Madam PS, Chief Guest, thank you so much. My name is Isao Riaro. I work for Legal Resource Foundation Trust. Thank you so much for having us here. Some of the issues I wanted to raise have already been raised, so allow me just to commend you and the team for taking this process forward, the team led by Dr. Bondi, because the reforms have been long in the making, and we are glad that finally we are going to have the fruit. I'd like to humbly request if we could get a draft of the bill as early as we can, so that we were able to interrogate it and share our views. As civil society organizations working within the correctional facilities, we are keen to support this process, and we have a lot of materials, some which we shared with Dr. Baraga. I'd also humbly request if we could have an email, because I've seen that in terms of public consultations, if we could have emails, and also where we could deposit the memorandums even ahead of the public hearings. Just to conclude by thanking you once again for the good work done. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam PS, Honorable Prime Cabinet Secretary. My name is Hamisi Mzari. I work with Justice Defenders. I just want to highlight what my brother Maurice talked about paralegal work, but I want to bring the perspective of the legal aid work. Looking at the team that is working on the current correctional bill, I do not see members from the National Legal Aid Service. And almost half of the inmates in prisons are those who are undergoing trial. And out of that number, a great majority of them, around 80% of them, do not have legal representation in court. And they're the people who are overcrowding our prisons at the moment. We have organizations that are offering paralegal work to train these inmates on self-representation. But we do not have any legal framework that ensures that some of these organizations are funded. The National Legal Aid Service in itself is not funded enough to provide legal representation for these inmates who are awaiting trial and they're in custody. It is a constitutional right that every accused person must have legal representation, but it is not a reality. Looking at the framework I've seen, we are leaning too much on the convicted prisons, the offenders, their rehabilitation, but we are forgetting this critical mass population in prison that requires legal representation and may end up being convicted wrongfully or not receiving justice. How are we going to ensure that the same is also incorporated in the new bill, which will become an act, so that we can have stakeholders, partners, and government ensure that we have somebody like an office of public defender, or at least we have a way of funding for those organizations that are offering this legal aid service to inmates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think those ideas that have been advanced are valid, and I think the technical committee, the Secretariat, has taken them into account, and I think we will address all of them, and we see where some of them fit. Obviously, some of them are cross-cutting, and probably we will take them to the National Commission on Access to Justice, because some of them are domiciled in other justice sector players' departments. So, but the ones that are domiciled in our department, we will take them into consideration. And Your Excellency, I'm happy to report that indeed it is true. From our facilities, we've had graduations. Recently, we had 14 graduate from in law. Then we have one who is going to graduate soon in a Bachelor of Medicine. And we have others who've graduated in mechanical engineering and veterinary medicine. So indeed it is true, and I agree with the delegate that it is important that we have a robust and concrete education policy within the system, so that the persons who are incarcerated do actually benefit from the education sector. We already have an education unit that is doing a tremendous job to ensure that the persons who are sitting exams are actually incorporated. Again, we will also take into consideration the issues raised about parole, about a stipend, and that's why we have the prison enterprise being one of the issues that will be tackled by the bill and the policy. So I thank you all very much for all the ideas that are advanced, and we will take Dr. Maraga's idea into consideration, that we actually go into the X space as a way of public participation. Perhaps it may wind up being even more effective. So I thank you all, and I wish to hand over the matter to the issue, the session to our MC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam PS. And as the PS goes back to the podium, yes, the document will be available from immediately after this function. We'll give a link where you can download, but all of us here will have a hard copy of the consultation paper. Madam PS.
Thank you very much. And now it is my honor and humble duty to invite His Excellency, the Prime Cabinet Secretary. I request we all be upstanding so that he can come and make his remarks. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Okay, thank you. Please be seated. Dr. Salome Biako, Principal Secretary, State Department for Correctional Services, Principal Secretaries present, Excellencies, Heads of Diplomatic Missions, Ministry officials, stakeholders and partners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. In the last few weeks, I've been mutating from one role to the other. So I'm eagerly waiting for the vetting process to come to an end and Parliament to finish its business so that I can stop mutating. But nevertheless, I'm happy to be here with you this morning so that I can share some thoughts and at the same time inaugurate this very important journey that you have embarked on. So I'll be making my formal speech shortly, but let me, I'm slightly taller, is it? Okay. Let me just start by making a disclosure. In 1982, when I was a student at the University of Nairobi, I also had my brush with the law, and I also spent my few days in custodial territory. So I can understand a bit of what is being talked about here, because we spent some time as students after being rounded up in 1982 for allegations of having been involved in that process. And some of us spent time. So I have a fairly good idea of what it means to be behind the bars. But that is for here. So I am delighted to join you here today for the launch of public consultations on the development of a legal framework for correctional services. This gathering signifies a powerful convergence of minds, a collective commitment to our shared vision of a prosperous and harmonious society. Together, we stand at the threshold of transformative change in the management of corrections in Kenya, ready to embrace new horizons and strive towards a better tomorrow. The exercise we are launching today comes at a particularly critical time, given the tensions that persist between the rights of offenders and the aspirations of our people to build a more inclusive Kenya. The state of our correctional services institutions, including congestion in prisons and poor living conditions of our correctional service staff, have widely been criticized. Indeed, any conversation about correctional services elicits emotional issues about human rights abuses, corruption, drug abuse, and other vices that we really need to correct. And I will come back to this specific area towards the end of my remarks. This process, therefore, marks a new dawn in the government's commitment to overhaul the legal framework for correctional services to align it with the Constitution and the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. Our responsibility is to develop a robust legal framework that complies with universally accepted standards and helps to improve the livelihoods of our people, particularly at the bottom of the pyramid. The Constitution upholds important commitments, advancement and administration, including correctional services. Furthermore, Kenya is a signatory to various international statutes which, with obligations in relation to the fair and just management of offenders. I am pleased to note that the bill we are discussing here will amend the Probation of Cap 64 and Community Service Orders Act Cap 93 and repeal the Prisons Act Cap 90 and the Postal Institutions Act Cap 92. The overarching goal is to ensure the legal framework for correctional services are in line with the Constitution and upholds universally accepted international standards and best practices. In fact, the PS was telling me that once this is done, Kenya would be the first to achieve this particular unification. In that case, then it must be done. The bill will move forward the vast majority of previous task force reports and recommendations, including the National Task Force on Improvement of Terms and Conditions of Service for members of the National Police Service, Kenya Prisons Service, and the National Youth Service. The direction we are taking will enable us to tap into the collective wisdom and resources of the global community and ensure that corrections, transformation efforts are not isolated, but resonate with Sustainable Development Goals, the African Union Agenda 2063, and the East African Community Vision 2050, among other international obligations. This will provide an opportunity for us to amplify the impact of our initiatives, foster partnerships, and most importantly, contribute to a more just and secure world for our current and future generations. I wish to assure you that my office will support the current efforts by the State Department for Correctional Services to expand opportunities for the transformation of our correctional services in the country. My office will also oversight and coordinate the process of developing the new legislation, including ensuring constructive public participation and stakeholder engagement. This will enable us to develop an acceptable legislation that responds to the challenges we have experienced in managing correctional services. Let me encourage our development partners and stakeholders to actively work with us on this journey by supporting the reforms being undertaken by the Department of Correctional Services, as well as the wider security and criminal justice sector. This will enable Kenya to benefit from the emerging skills, investments, and networks driving correctional services on the global stage. Let us appreciate the leadership of the State Department and the Technical Committee for spearheading this important exercise. The experts involved bring together a rich blend and diversity of skills, competencies, backgrounds, and experiences that will contribute to the success of this process. I also wish to recognize the International Development Law Organization and all other partners and stakeholders who have passionately contributed to the success of this initiative. Finally, let me assure Kenyans that this exercise is being carried out with utmost good faith and intentions for the betterment of our people and our country. So, what do I wish to contribute? Because I think we've started off to a very good start. Just sampling the comments from the various members, and indeed the position also taken by from Kuruini. I said I wanted to come back to, you talk of congestion, you talk of how do we deal with the conditions and so forth. I want to I did not see where in other countries, and I'm sure you have that, in other countries, there is a public-private partnership arrangement where custodial facilities or prisons can be developed by the private sector on a PPP basis, and then meeting the standards and the requirements that designs in the legislation. You can then have private sector investing in these facilities, because a government will have enough money to undertake this exercise. Somebody talked of the mothers with children, but they are in custody. There could be a blueprint of a design of facilities of this nature, which then can be brought out on a PPP basis, then developed by the private sector. And these are the kind of facilities that mothers who have to undergo that challenge can go. People with disabilities may be required from time to time, perhaps, to also face correctional services. What kind of facilities are we putting them in? So you can actually work with the private sector to develop this, and it will be easier because then you don't have to put your money directly into it. It's done, and through a proper arrangement defined in law, these facilities can be built, and you can reduce within the custody and the preserve of the department and the government itself. But this, I believe, is a window that we have never exploited in this country, and it is being exploited, and it's being done in other countries. If you walked in a lot of the other cities, whether you are somewhere in Europe, you'd be by walking past a prison and you would not know that it is a prison. It's been built to standards, and those standards can be done. So my contribution as a public member of the public is that in your document, please make provision legally where you can embrace private sector involvement in reducing the infrastructure capacity that you are facing. Because the government may not have enough money for that. The taxpayer may not have enough money for that. So please consider that. The other thing that I may now want to say is that it is true that there's the Maraga report, and I just want to assure our men and women in uniform within the prison service that their matter is receiving very high level attention, and as the Director General the Commissioner General did mention, it's going to be addressed. So it's important that I also put that on record so that we don't have undue anxiety. And I want to assure you that the PS and the new commissioner have been very, very aggressive in reminding me that there was a presidential directive that must be upheld. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, let me thank you for being patient, and also to say that just listening, there is a lot of knowledge in this room. a lot of knowledge and experience. Utilize it well so that we can have the best bill, the best framework going forward. So it is now my privilege to officially launch the public consultation on the development of legal framework for correctional services. Thank you and God bless you all.